His rifle slipped from his hands when he saw it, the turquoise necklace, dangling from her neck, catching the firelight like a ghost. The same necklace he buried with his wife 3 winters ago. He didn't speak. Couldn't. The woman stared, back at him trembling, her face still streaked with soot and blood. He had pulled her from the smoking wreck of the wagon train, fought off the raiders who'd circled back to finish the job. She didn't know his name yet, but now he needed to know hers. The winds howled across the plains like wolves, stirring the ashes of the dead. His hand hovered near his holster, not out of threat but instinct. He hadn't felt this kind of fear since the night he buried her. "Where'd you get that necklace?" His voice was gravel. She blinked. "My mama gave it too. B said it belonged to my sister, one who died out here before I was born." His chest tightened, because his wife never had a sister. "Before we jump back, introduce yourself in the comments and let me know where you're tuning in from. And make sure you're subscribed, 'cause this story's just getting started." The town of Dry Creek didn't welcome strangers, and it certainly didn't welcome her. Dust settled on everything here, on boots, on roofs, on memories folks tried to forget. Wind creaked the church's weather vane, the same way it had every day since the war ended. Dry Creek wasn't much. A jail with a busted lock. A school with 1 chalkboard and 2 broken benches. A general store that carried everything except kindness. She lived in the old livery loft, above where they used to keep the horses. Now it was just hay and silence. Most nights the coyotes howled louder than the church bell. They called her Limp Girl when they didn't think she could hear them. But she could. She just chose not to answer. Her name was Eliza. Widow Eliza, some said. Others whispered different stories, that she once slit her husband's throat in his sleep, that she couldn't speak because of what she'd seen during the massacre at Red Ridge, that she wandered into town barefoot and blood-soaked one summer night and never explained. Why, no one really knew, and that made her dangerous. She walked with a limp. Left leg dragged just a little behind the right, like it was half stuck in some old memory she couldn't shake loose. Her right hand didn't always work right, especially when it got cold. Sometimes she'd hold it close to her chest like it hurt to even carry. She rarely spoke. Didn't need to. Her eyes did the talking. They were flint gray, hard, watching everyone, remembering everything. The kids said she was a witch. The men said she was bad luck. The women just stopped inviting her to church. Eliza swept the front of the general store every morning, not because she was paid to, but because it gave her something to do, something steady. There were no real jobs for women who didn't smile. No one bought her pies when she tried to sell them. No one answered her notes when she posted them. She was alone, and that was safer. Safer than letting someone in again. Every Sunday she'd sit in the back row of the chapel, veil pulled low, hands folded like someone pretending to pray. But she wasn't praying. Not anymore. She was listening, watching, counting the townsfolk like chess pieces, studying who walked with whom, who avoided eye contact, who lied when they said they were doing just fine. There were things you learned when no one thought you mattered, things no one meant to say when they thought you couldn't hear, like how the sheriff's son had a girl stashed out near Devil's Bluff, or how 3 of the men who died in the blizzard had actually never come back from a scouting trip. That went too far west. Or how one name kept showing up in whispers too faint to hear unless you were listening close enough. Kirkland. Eliza knew that name, and she never said it out loud. There was a room in her loft no one had seen. A little space with a cracked mirror, 1 blue ribbon, and a turquoise necklace laid gently in a wooden box. She took it out only once a year, on the day the wind smelled like burned cotton and old gunpowder, the day she stopped being a wife, the day her world cracked in half. Before we dive deeper into the story, just a quick note. I'm Thomas, the voice behind this narration. If you enjoy how it sounds, let me know in the comments so we can keep the same voice in future videos. That morning, something felt off. The ravens were louder than usual, sitting up on the chapel cross like they were watching for a signal. The sun rose behind clouds shaped like teeth. Eliza felt the ache in her leg earlier than usual. and the chill in her hand didn't go away even when she wrapped it in wool. A wagon train had come through the night before. She'd heard the wheels crunch over the rocks, the horses snorting, tired and restless, new people, new risks, new stories about to tangle with hers. She stayed hidden, watched from the loft window. One of the travelers, tall man, tan duster, broad shoulders, had the same look she wore when she first limped into Dry Creek. Lost, tired, carrying something heavy that couldn't be seen. Eliza didn't trust men, who looked like they'd buried someone, because they usually had. She watched him help a young woman down from the wagon, dark-haired, slight build, wrapped in a too-thin shawl. The girl stumbled once. The man caught her before she hit the ground. They didn't speak, but the air between them was thick with something unsaid. Eliza narrowed her eyes. That girl had a limp, too. Later that day, the sheriff rode into town, white-faced and wild-eyed. Said the back half of the wagon train had been ambushed. Said they found 3 survivors and 12 dead. Said one of the survivors was a woman who didn't remember her name, but wore a turquoise necklace that looked a hell of a lot like the one buried with Eliza's sister. Only, Eliza never had a sister, and the girl had her face. The wind changed the next day, not in a way most folks would notice. Not yet. But Eliza felt it in her bones. The kind of shift that made horses restless and dogs pace near the doors. It came from the west, dry and sharp, like it had rolled across something scorched. She was sweeping the porch of the general store when he walked past again. Same worn duster, same tired eyes, same slow, heavy steps like he hadn't rested in weeks. He didn't look at her, not exactly, but his gaze caught the edge of her shadow and held just a second too long. Most men didn't look at her, and the ones who did never looked twice. He nodded once, polite, respectful, no smile, just acknowledgement, like she was real, like she mattered. That was new. She stopped sweeping. The moment passed, and he kept walking toward the stables. She told herself it was nothing, just another drifter passing through, trying to stay ahead of some old ghost. But still, she stood there a moment longer, broom idle in her hand, as if the wind had stolen her breath and hadn't given it back yet. By noon, half the town knew the girl from the wagon train was staying at the sheriff's house, and by supper, the whispers had begun. She don't remember much, they said. Claims she was born on the plains. Says her mama died in childbirth, her daddy, gone before that. Been raised by traders. Pretty girl. Odd girl. Talks in her sleep. Screams sometimes. And always. Wearing that necklace like it means something. Eliza didn't ask to see her, but she couldn't stop thinking about her either. That night thunder growled in the distance. No lightning, no rain, just sound rolling low across the hills like a warning. Eliza lay in her cot, staring at the ceiling beams, listening to the storm that never came, and just before dawn, she heard boots on the stairs. Quiet, careful boots. She reached for the knife under her pillow, but it wasn't a thief. The cowboy was at her door. He didn't knock, just stood there, silhouetted against the pale blue light. Dust clung to his coat and something darker clung to his face. Guilt, maybe, or grief. "I need to talk to someone who don't lie," he said. Eliza didn't answer. Just opened the door. They sat across from each other in the loft. No fire, no lamp, just the faint light of dawn leaking through the cracks in the wall. She poured him a cup of water. He didn't touch it. "She don't remember me," he said, voice rough like gravel dragged through whiskey. "Not really, but she was wearing my wife's necklace." Eliza blinked, her hand curled slightly at her side. "She says it was her sister's," he went on, "but I never had a sister. Neither did my wife." He looked up at her. Really looked. "There's a scar under her collarbone, just above the chain. I remember giving it to her the night before the wedding. She tripped in the river, landed hard, said it didn't hurt, but she bled. I wrapped her up myself." He rubbed his hands together. "Not from cold, from memory. I buried her after the Red Ridge massacre. Swore I saw her body. Swore I saw her hand clutching that necklace. Eliza didn't speak. Either she's lying, he said, voice tightening, or something happened out there that no one's told me. The silence between them was thick, heavy with things neither of them dared ask. Finally, Eliza stood, crossed the room, opened a drawer. She took out a box, small, wooden, worn from years of being handled with care. Inside was a ribbon, a dried flower, a necklace, just like the one the girl wore. The cowboy stared. I had one too, Eliza said, her voice quiet but sure. It wasn't mine. It was my sister's. He flinched, and for a moment the lines between past and present blurred, between what they lost and what might still be found. The wind outside picked up. This time, it carried the smell of smoke. And just like that, the spell was broken. Eliza crossed to the window, peered out. A dust cloud rose at the edge of the ridge, too fast for a wagon, too erratic for wind. Riders, she said. He joined her at the window, squinted. Not local, he muttered. Not friendly. They both knew it, felt it in the way the air tightened, in the way the town's dogs had gone quiet. You need to get her out of here, Eliza said. He looked at her. You think they're coming for her? I think they're coming for someone. A knock came at the trap door. Sheriff Callum's voice tense. Eliza, you got company. The cowboy opened the door. The sheriff didn't even blink at seeing him there. His jaw was set, his eyes dark. They're asking for the girl, won't say why, won't say who sent them. He looked between the two of them. But they're wearing the same coats as the raiders from Red Ridge. Eliza felt her throat tighten. They shouldn't know she's here, the cowboy said. The sheriff nodded. They do. And suddenly the past wasn't behind them anymore. It was knocking on the front door. They came at dusk, 4 riders, dust-streaked, hard-eyed, faces half-covered in cloth, hands never far from their belts. They didn't raise their voices or fire their guns. They didn't need to. Everyone in Dry Creek understood quiet threats. They stopped in front of the sheriff's office and dismounted in unison, like soldiers who hadn't forgotten discipline or violence. One of them carried a long rifle slung across his back, the kind used for hunting men, not game. Eliza watched from the shadows behind the stable, veil drawn low. She'd been here before. Not this exact moment, but this feeling. The slow boil of a town turning on itself. The ache in her leg was worse that evening, a sign, a warning. She never ignored pain. It always told the truth even when people didn't. The cowboy stood near the church, watching them too. But he didn't move. Not yet. Sheriff Callum walked out to meet the strangers. He looked smaller than usual, like he'd already lost whatever argument they were about to have. The leader spoke low. Calm. We want the girl. Hand her over. There's no trouble. Keep her, and things get messy. The sheriff didn't answer right away, but his glance toward the window said more than words. He was thinking about giving her up. Not just thinking. Choosing. And Eliza knew it. She slipped back into the alley, teeth clenched against the stab in her hip. The sky was going blue with nightfall. She moved fast, gathered the girl's shawl, the necklace box, a flask of water. She had no plan, just instinct. She'd leave with the girl, get her out before the town sold her for peace. But when she reached the back door of the sheriff's quarters, it was open, and the girl was gone. Gone. Not taken. Not stolen. Gone, and in her place, a note, hurried, scrawled in soft, unsure handwriting. He said I should leave, that I don't belong here, that you'd understand. I'm sorry. It was signed with only an E. Eliza stared at the paper, felt her chest go cold. She turned, ran, out the back, through the alleys, past the saloon, and the closed-up post office. Her limp slowed her, made every step feel like a nail driven into her spine. But she didn't stop, not until she saw them, near the ridge. 2 silhouettes, one on horseback, one leading the way. Sheriff Callum's son and her. He was taking the girl to them, and that's when something in Eliza broke. She didn't shout, didn't go for her knife. She just stood there in the snow-salted dirt, watching it happen again. Another girl taken, another lie told, another man deciding what was best for someone else. The cowboy found her there. Hours later. The night had fallen cold and quiet. Most of the town had shut its doors, but Eliza stood alone at the edge of the trail, her shawl pulled tight, hair tangled by the wind, her limp heavier than ever. He didn't speak, just walked up beside her. "You knew?" she asked, voice dry. He shook his head. "Didn't. But I saw his boots heading west before dusk. Figured it meant something." "I trusted her," Eliza whispered. "I thought maybe—" She trailed off. There was no maybe. There was only what had happened. He looked at her. "You didn't trust her. You protected her. There's a difference." She didn't respond. The silence between them was the kind that hurts. Then he said, "My wife used to cry without making a sound. Whole, body shaking, not a word. Said loud tears felt selfish." Eliza turned away. He didn't stop her, but he didn't leave either. "I know that look," he said quietly. "That weight you're carrying. I carried it too. Still do some days." She took a slow breath. "What weight?" "The kind where no one ever believed your side of the story. The kind where you survive, and they still call you the villain." Eliza blinked hard, and that's when the tears came. Not loud, not fast, just a few, stinging cold against her cheeks. He didn't reach for her, didn't offer warmth. He just stood there, shoulder to shoulder, present. It was more than anyone had done in a long, long time. They walked back to town together, slowly, quietly. By the time they reached the loft, the fire was still smoldering in the stove. She poured 2 mugs of hot water, dropped dried mint leaves in his without asking. He took a sip, winced slightly. "You ever sleep?" he asked. She gave a half smile. "Sometimes, mostly by accident." He nodded. "Same." They sat on opposite sides of the room near the fire. She finally said, "I'm tired of being useful and disposable in the same breath." He didn't answer right away. Then, "You're not disposable to me." Something in her chest shifted. A small, unfamiliar warmth. "I don't need saving," she said. "I didn't come to save you." His voice was soft. "Sure. I came because I didn't want you to be alone when the world cracked open again." The fire popped in the stove. Eliza reached for the box with the necklace, held it in her lap like a fragile truth. She wasn't my sister, she said. She was me. That girl. The cowboy's eyes didn't widen. He just nodded slowly, like he'd suspected. "I remember now," Eliza continued. "Bits and pieces. Someone paid the raiders to leave one girl alive. Not out of mercy, just for proof." "Proof of what?" "That the massacre happened. That it was meant to happen, that it was ordered." His jaw clenched. She looked up. "You want revenge?" He shook his head. "No. I want peace. But I don't mind if I have to go through hell to find it." Their eyes met across the firelight. Not as strangers, not as saviors, but as two people, still standing in the wreckage of what should have been. Spring broke late in Dry Creek that year. The frost held on longer than it should have, and the snowmelt came fast, too fast. It turned the roads to mud and the river to something violent, but with it came color, little things. Yellow flowers in the ditch, buds on the brittle apple tree, behind the blacksmiths. And in the hills, the grass rose high enough to hide a rider's legs. Eliza felt it too. The thaw. Not in her bones, those still ached every morning, but in the way she walked. Straighter, eyes forward. The town hadn't changed, not much. Folks still crossed the street to avoid her, still whispered when she passed. But now she didn't bow her head. She didn't shrink to fit their stories. She had her own. They found a piece of land just north of the creek, a wide stretch of earth where wild horses sometimes passed through, and the stars came down low at night. The cabin was half burnt when they found it. Ash in the rafters, rot in the boards. But the bones were good, so they rebuilt it. Side by side. He handled the heavy work. She handled the stubborn. Every time he said can't, she found a way. Every time she said enough, he gave her time. They didn't talk much during those first weeks, but silence had become their native tongue. The corral came next, then a lean-to for tools, then a stall for a stray mare that followed him back one night, ribs showing, eyes wild. Eliza named her Mercy. The work burned away the past, not erased, never that, but it carved room for something new. One night, while the wind snapped against the shutters, he said, "You ever want to leave this place?" She was sewing a patch into a saddle blanket. Her fingers paused. "No," she said, "but I'd leave for the right reason." He nodded. "Me too." They didn't define what that reason was. They didn't have to. But peace doesn't come without a price. 3 weeks after the last snow, Sheriff Callum rode up to the gate, alone. Dust clung to his coat like guilt. His face had aged 10 years in just a season. "I thought you should know," he said. "That girl, the one you took in, she sent a letter." Eliza stood still. The cowboy stepped beside her. Quiet, solid. "She's in Abilene now," the sheriff went on. "Working for a woman who teaches orphans to read. Says she's doing fine. Asked me to thank you for the necklace. Said it made her feel rooted." He shifted in the saddle, nervous. "But there's more. The men who came for her, only one name showed up on the wire." He looked at the cowboy. "Your brother." The air dropped 5 degrees. The cowboy didn't blink. Thought he was dead. Apparently not. He's with a trade company now, shady one. Got contracts with union officials. He sent the riders, said he needed to clean up old sins. The sheriff looked between them. "He's coming. Probably. Within a week." Then he turned and rode off, just like that, like he was done carrying the burden. That night they didn't sleep. The fire crackled low. The stars blinked through the slats. He told her everything, about the raid, about the betrayal, about how his brother had taken money to guide raiders through Red Ridge, how the cowboy found out too late, how he buried his wife beside the river with hands that couldn't stop shaking. "I rode after him once," he said. "Got within 10 miles. Then I turned back." "Why?" Eliza asked. "Because I didn't know if I wanted justice or revenge." She nodded. "And now?" He looked at her. "Now I've got something worth protecting." That was the first time he touched her. Not a kiss. Not even her face. Just her hand, calloused fingers brushing her knuckles. A promise with no words. The next morning they prepared, not for war, but for clarity. They stacked wood, shored the fence, set traps on the ridge. The cowboy oiled his rifle, cleaned his revolver, then taught Eliza how to shoot without flinching. She didn't flinch. She hit the can at 40 paces, twice. "You've done this before," he said. She smiled. "Only when I had to." That night they sat under the stars. She leaned against him, shoulder against shoulder, like they had on the trail that broken night. "You ever think we're cursed?" she asked. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But maybe we're just cracked enough to let some light through." She didn't say anything, but her fingers curled around his coat, and he let her stay close. The final challenge came faster than expected. His brother didn't ride in with guns, didn't storm the gates. He came alone, clean-shaven, dressed like a man who'd learned to pass for respectable. But his eyes, those eyes hadn't changed. They met on the ridge. Eliza stood behind the gate, rifle on her shoulder, watching, listening. The cowboy stepped out first. "Didn't expect you to show," he said. The brother laughed. "Figured I owed you the truth." "You owed me a lot more than that." "Sure, but truth's a start." He dismounted, pulled something from his coat. A badge, union sealed. "I'm not just a traitor anymore," he said. "I'm government." Eliza tensed. The cowboy held up a hand. "Calm," You came to finish what you started? No, the brother said. I came to offer you both something better. Leave the girl behind. Leave this ranch. Come with me. I can get you off the records. New names. Clean start. The cowboy didn't move. You killed them, he said. All those families. For what? For a future, the brother snapped, and it worked. I have one. Eliza stepped forward then, voice like flint. We have one too, and it didn't cost anyone their soul. The brother looked at her. Something shifted in his face. Recognition, maybe. Or shame. You're her, he whispered. She didn't answer. The wind picked up, and with it came the sound of no. Loud, clear, final. No deal, the cowboy said. We stand, right here. The brother held his gaze, then nodded once. Then, this is the last time you see me, he said. He rode off, and didn't look back. They stood in silence for a long time. Eliza let the rifle fall to her side. You believe him? She asked. No, but he won't be back. Not alone. But next time we'll be ready. She looked at the ranch. Their home. The fences, the firelight, the stubborn horse named Mercy. We already are, she said. He looked at her. You. Sure? She nodded. Even if we lose it all, it was real, and it was ours. He smiled. Then let's keep building. The town didn't gather often anymore. Too many old wounds, too many names never spoken aloud. But this morning, they gathered, not because of law, not for blood, but because the church bell rang at dawn, 3 times, slow and sure. The last time that bell had sounded, it had been for morning. Today, no one knew what it meant. So they came, from behind shuttered doors and dusty kitchens, from the dry fields and crooked porches. Even Sheriff Callum showed, hat in hand, jaw tight. Eliza stood in front of the chapel, alone at first, hair braided down her back, shawl drawn against the wind, that old limp still in her step, but her spine straight as a rifle barrel. She didn't flinch when the whispers started, didn't blink when the preacher raised an eyebrow. She just looked past them all, toward the edge of the square where he stood, the cowboy, hat in hand, eyes steady, dust on his boots. That familiar quiet strength that didn't need proving anymore. They hadn't spoken of this moment. Not out loud. But she had said one thing, the night before, while standing on the porch with the stars above them. If you want me to hide with you again, I won't. He hadn't hesitated. I don't want to hide you, he'd said. I want to stand beside you. Now was the test. Eliza looked out at the people who had cut her with silence, who had watched her burn and blamed her for the fire. And then he walked toward her, one step, then another. Through the whispers, through the tension, through every ghost still hanging in the air, he stopped beside her, took her hand, not roughly, not as a show, but as if it had always belonged there. I'm not asking permission, he said, looking at no one but her. Just saying the truth. Plain. This is where I stand. With you. A long silence followed. Then a sound. A woman clearing her throat. Then a child clapping once without knowing why. Then nothing but the wind. She looked at him. You sure? He nodded. You? I'm not running anymore, she said. Even if the ground gives way, he smiled. Then we build right on the edge. They married under stars, not in the chapel, not under the law, but out on the land they'd worked with their own hands. The preacher came only after dark. No paper, no sermon, just words that mattered. Eliza wore no veil, no lace, just her boots, her braid, and the necklace that had once belonged to a girl who never made it home. He wore his wife's old ring on a chain around his neck, and when he said his vows, he slipped it onto Eliza's hand, not to replace the past, but to carry it forward. They didn't dance. There was no crowd, just 2 mugs of coffee, a warm fire, and Mercy curled up near the porch post. Later that night, they talked about names. Not for land, not for cattle, for a child. She hadn't thought about it before, Not really. But now, with the ache in her heart softened, with his hand over hers beneath the blanket, the idea didn't feel like a wound. It felt like a window. "What if it's a girl?" he asked. She traced the rim of her mug. "Then we name her Clara, after the one I couldn't save." "And if it's a boy?" She looked up at him, smiled. "After no one. Let him write his own name into the world." He nodded. "Good." The town never truly changed. Some still turned away when they passed, but others didn't. One woman left bread on their gate every Sunday. The blacksmith offered iron for the barn roof and refused payment. Even the sheriff nodded when he rode by, shame still heavy in his eyes. Eliza didn't forget what they'd done, but she no longer carried it in her bones. She carried herself, whole, seen, chosen, not as someone broken, but as someone rebuilt. One winter morning, years later, a boy ran through the snow with bare feet, chasing a red scarf stolen by the wind. He reached the fence, climbed it, and ran into the arms of a man with gray in his beard and warmth in his hands. Behind them, a woman stepped onto the porch. A scar still marked her leg. But her smile, that was the brightest thing on the horizon. The boy pointed to the sky. "Look, Mama, it's snowing like angels." She knelt down beside him. "Maybe it is." He tilted his head. "You believe in angels?" She looked at the man, at the land, at the life they'd carved from ash and silence. "I believe in miracles," she whispered. She was never a curse. She was someone's miracle all along. Subscribe, and let me introduce you to the next miracle tomorrow.